After reading G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, Bix Weir began his own research and developed an alternative theory, which has a different motivation for the creation of the Federal Reserve banking system, and involves patriots infiltrating the Fed to destroy it from within. President Woodrow Wilson, who strongly opposed private banks, signed off on the Federal Reserve Act, something he deeply regretted soon after. According to the Road to Ruta theory, Wilson signed off on it out of fear of catastrophic inflation. The amount of gold being found in the late 1800s was causing an endless rise of inflation. By 1900, several mining companies were harvesting gold from the Grand Canyon, which was a major undertaking. An 80-mile-long road was built to access a coal deposit for power, and barges and steamships were assembled in the canyon to deliver this coal every day. By 1912, the New York Times reported that billions of ounces of gold were estimated to be dredged from this operation. And at this time, there was only 64 million ounces of gold in the U.S. Treasury, and 160 worldwide. Adding billions of ounces would have been economically catastrophic. It would have driven the value of gold to zero, devastating the world's economies and destroying the wealth of the world's most powerful people. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law, the cornerstone of today's fiat currencies and debt-based economy. And in 1919, President Wilson banned all mining in the Grand Canyon. The massive influx of gold alone would have been enough to compel a new financial system. But there is more to the story. In the late 1800s, local homesteader Seth Tanner claimed to have seen mummies and artifacts in a cave within the Grand Canyon's Marble Canyon. When the Hopi learned he had seen the sacred site, they blinded him, sparing his life because of his Hopi marriage. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette reported that the Smithsonian was researching a man-made cave structure carved deep within the solid rock, 1,480 feet below the surface in Marble Canyon, big enough to house 50,000 people, with rooms full of ancient golden artifacts, mummies, and Egyptian hieroglyphs dating back 3,000 years to the Ramses dynasty. This is the same area that Seth Tanner described seeing the same thing. It's the same area where the famous Lost City of Gold was thought to be. And it's the land of the Hopi, whose ancestors once lived in the Great Hole Sipapu, commonly known as the Grand Canyon, where several geological formations have been given names from ancient Egypt. In 1956, two planes collided in midair, directly above the alleged cave system of Marble Canyon. And over the next 2 weeks, a dozen helicopters worked to haul out debris. And yet, debris is still scattered everywhere. There were no witnesses, and the bodies of the victims were all buried in a mass grave. The Leak Project's investigation of this cave shows what appears to be the remnants of this recovery operation. The Grand Canyon is full of caves, 90% unexplored and off-limits, protected by the U.S. military. Every president since Bush Sr. has tried to secure mining rights within the Grand Canyon, and all have been denied. This leads us to the second part of the Road to Ruta theory, that the Fed has been infiltrated by patriots on a mission to destroy it from within. Our main character is Alan Greenspan, who is friends with Ayn Rand, who published his 1966 essay, Gold and Economic Freedom, on the importance of a gold-backed monetary system. Greenspan was a gold bug. In 1969, a Swedish economist published On the Road to the Golden Age, which concludes that the best way to return to sound money is to run the fiat system into the ground by printing money into infinity, so that gold will restore stability and faith in the money supply, and fiat will be exposed for what it's always been, a scam. In 1971, President Nixon ended dollar convertibility to gold, which invited the money printers worldwide to let loose. Not only was Greenspan a renowned gold bug, He may be the most unsung hero of the computer age. He was childhood friends with the inventor of the first shareable computer programming language, called BASIC, which Greenspan used to write the very first banking computer programs at his firm, Townsend Greenspan, back when punch cards were still being used. By 1985, Alan Greenspan was the expert on computer banking.
I suggest an Apple IIc, an Apple modem. Then you can call up your bank and see how much money you have. You can even pay off your bills automatically. If you have any money left over, congratulations. You're doing better than the government is.
2 years later, President Reagan nominated Greenspan as Fed chairman. That same year, legislation was passed to restrict Grand Canyon airspace. During his first year as president, Ronald Reagan formed a committee to investigate the possibility of returning to gold-backed money. The majority was against it, but Congressman Ron Paul's report argued that we need to return to a decentralized gold-backed standard. At the end, however, Ron Paul proposed holding off until the current fiat system had a chance to prove itself. In other words, run the money printers and let them fail. Also in 1981, the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston published the first edition of their educational comic book, Wishes and Rainbows, which tells a story of a place that once had beautiful colors and golden flowers, but no longer does out of fear of being stepped on by the big people who live in Colorland, which is where the golden flowers can be found. Some say you can get there through the caves of Cobblestone Canyon. The main character of this comic, who decides to bring back the golden flowers, is Ruta. In the early BASIC programs that Greenspan wrote 60 years ago, Root A was the foundation. Ruta finds a golden light inside a cave of Cobblestone Canyon and begins bringing flowers back to her people, only to learn the problems of scarcity and demand. As she tries figuring out a solution, she writes the equations from On the Road to the Golden Age, print the money into infinity. In 2007, the Boston Fed published an updated version of their cryptic Wishes and Rainbows. And in this edition, Ruta's solution in the dust is 11 plus 9, which looks an awful lot like 9/11. And right after this was published, the economic crash of 2008 began. Also in 2008, the Bitcoin white paper is published. And while nobody knows who authored it, Alan Greenspan, with his 60 years of expertise in digital banking, certainly could have played a part. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.